evening. So we're going to have 3 speakers tonight. They'll each be speaking for about 10 minutes about some of their remarkable experiences in the water. Our first legend to speak tonight is Susan Sherwen from Auckland. Susan's swimming career began in Taupo Swim Club, and as a teenager she was a New Zealand representative, but she then took about a 25-year hiatus from serious swimming. She dived back into the sport, this time as an open water swimmer, in the Auckland Harbour crossing in 2006. Returning to swimming has been a game changer for Susan. She told me that she is now fitter and healthier than she was 20 years ago, and she has certainly proved this recently. In 2019, Susan swam Lake Taupo, and in April this year she swam Cook Strait, becoming at 60 years of age, and she has my permission to tell everyone how old she is, the second oldest woman by just a few months to have achieved this amazing feat. However, she says that she has no plans to do it again next year in order to take that particular crown. So I'd like to welcome Susan to come to the platform now and tell us about her experiences.
Yeah, it was a bit of a struggle getting a dress, but you know, and actually wearing one too, so it doesn't happen very often. Anyway, kia ora. Thanks for giving me this chance to speak at this amazing event, and thanks to SETI and the Wellington swimmers for organising it. I feel humble and honoured to be speaking amongst so many great swimmers with us today, because I see myself as an ordinary person who has just put in a lot of work and done some pretty cool things. Anyway, as Karina said, my story starts in Taupo in the 60s. I was one of those pain-in-the-butt kids that as soon as I saw water, I was in. And one day my mother ran out of the change rooms half-dressed to find 2-year-old me leaping into the deep end of the AC baths, closely followed by a lifeguard. That wasn't the only time I stressed out my mum, so at age 3 I got swimming lessons and then joined Taupo Swimming Club. One year at the club, we had a float at the Christmas parade, and we all dressed up in early swimming costumes. And on that float was Margaret Sweeney, who in 1955 was the first person to swim Lake Taupo. And so the seed was planted. At age 10, we shifted to Hamilton. I swam heaps, represented New Zealand for many years. And at my last Aussie Open Champs, I stood behind the blocks of the 400 freestyle beside a 13-year-old. She asked me how old I was, and when I replied 18, she said, "You're a granny." How times have changed. Now the top swimmers are generally over 18. I went from there to University of Houston, where I spent a year on a swimming scholarship, and came back in 1980, and like many other swimmers that year, I gave up swimming, but that's a story for another day. For the next 25 or so years, I dabbled in a little bit of water polo and university games, but I really got into the pool, apart from to cool off or to play with my 4 kids. Life happened, and then in 2005, I was very unfit and overweight, saw the harbour crossing I advertised and decided to give it a go. I nervously stood at the start line with 2 of my daughters and set off at the hooter. Got tired halfway across, so I stopped and I just looked around and just saw how beautiful it was. There was nobody else around me, so I had to keep going. I got to the end, talked to lots of people, made new friends, and I was hooked. Lesson number 1, you're never too old or too unfit to try something new. About this time, our family, including Mikey Cochrane, started doing tough guy challenges. That was my first one, I came last. I did a few triathlons, came last in that too. Someone has to come last, but for me, someone who was used to coming first or usually second to Rebecca Perrott in the New Zealand Open Champs, that was pretty tough. And that had stopped me going and doing any swimming for years, and seeing them do, Rebecca and a few others do master swimming and seeing their times, I was just scared I'd look really bad, so I didn't do it. Lesson number 2, if it's worth doing badly. So encourage your mates, no matter how slow they are, or if they wear a wetsuit or skins, it's okay. Try swimming at their pace for sometimes, but don't go easy on yourself. Be creative. Swim with fists, or do some butterfly, Or wear jean shorts. I've got 3 pairs of jean shorts that I wear depending on who I'm swimming with. I also add a small drogue if I'm swimming with my husband. Sorry, Lee. He often wears flippers too, by the way. But in Lee's defence, he's my biggest supporter. He's usually in the IRB, and we've got a bunch of swimmers with us, and he does an amazing job, and he tolerates me letting swimming dominate our lives, so thanks, Lee. Okay, so then we followed by the epic, also on very little training. Oh, hang on. No, missed a bit, sorry. Fast forward to December 2014. Mikey suggests we do the epic 10K in January, so it was December to January. It was a crazy idea, as I'd only been doing a couple of K once or twice a week that year. The first K was okay. When I began to realise what a dumb idea it was, as the longest swim that Mikey and I done was about 4K. From about 4 to 7K, I struggled mentally and almost swam ashore. But after that, I actually found it mentally easier. My arms felt like they were going to fall off, but when I passed Mikey swimming one-armed, I pushed on. That was the last time he let the old lady beat him. Then it was 2016 epic, also on very little training. It was at that epic that I swam the 14K of the 17.5 that first day, stroke for stroke with Katrina Price, who had swum Taupo a few years before. Now I believed I could do it. My Taupo swim mentally was a bit the same as my first epic, but this time I'd done the training. But I ended up projectile vomiting after only a few hours in. My feeding plan went out the window and I swam the rest on mainly fluids and a few peaches. Amazing what you can do on very little, although it's highly not recommended. Hey, Phil. A few memories. After I was catching my breath after projectile vomiting, Mikey said to me, "Are you done now?" And I kind of went like this. And he said, "Let's get going then." No sympathy, no nothing. A bit later on, fairly close to the end, I asked Mikey, "We got to that bloody point yet?" He said, "Yes, it's back there. Do you want to go back and do it again?" And then about 10K to go, I had a sore shoulder, and I thought, it's going to take a long time to get there if I have to do this one-armed. But then Phil gave me some drugs, and it was all good after that. It was tough, but at no stage did I think I was not going to make it. So on March the 8th, 2020, just over 14.5 hours after I'd started, I crawled out of the water. I guess what I'm saying is that doing these insane swims is you're going to run the gauntlet of emotions, interesting thoughts and pain. It's a bit like childbirth. Each swim is different and poses different challenges, and that goes for your training too. And no matter how much you read and how many swimmer stories you hear, you don't know how your story will unfold until you jump in the water and begin your swim. That was lesson number 4. In my prep for Taupo, I had a session with Brett Foster, who asked me if I'd thought about doing Cook Straight. I said, I'm probably way too slow. But he said, "Yeah, I think you're fast enough." So after I'd done Taupo, I asked Phil, and he seemed to think I could if I worked on my speed and sorted out my feeding plan. I also benefited from the lack of overseas swimmers due to COVID, and my window was set for April. Lesson number 5. If you think there's a possibility, don't be scared to ask. Early Tuesday, April the 6th this year, I was in the boat ready to swim Cook Straight. I jumped in the water at Ohau Bay and was surprised to feel, actually it's quite warm. I think it was about 16 degrees. Not sure how that feels warm, but you know. I started swimming. It took me a little while to adjust to the swell and rhythm of Cook Straight. Quite a different feeling from swimming in the harbours or lakes that I trained in. At this stage, I think I took on too much salt water and then felt bloated and didn't want my feeds. We sorted that later. This was one of the many times in my life I should have kept my mouth shut. I loved having the dolphins come to play, zooming underneath me. It really lifted my spirits. The jellyfish were cool too, but I was really glad they were a metre or so below me. It was beautiful out there, but unfortunately you don't have time to appreciate the scenery or stop and chat like you do in the training swims. Just feed, instructions, yes I can do that, and get on with it. It was touch and go at the end, but Corey, who was on my boat because Phil was with Fraser, was so cool, calm and collected, I didn't get any sense of panic. He just said, you need to really push it for 20 minutes. So I did, for at least 30 minutes, I'm sure. Then the next feed he says, you've done really well, only 2k to go, but you need to keep pushing it really hard or you're going to miss the landing and you've got another 3 hours of swimming. I was pleased I had done Taupo, as it helped me relax because I knew I'd done 14 and a half hours there. I knew I could do the extra, but I sure as hell didn't want to. And heard from the crew afterwards, they really didn't want to either. So I got my butt into gear and made it. So lesson number 7, if they ask you if you can do it, don't think, just shout yes and get on with the job at hand. I was so excited when Dermot, my awesome feeder, can't see him here somewhere, shone the bright light at me and then shone it on the cliff and said, swim over there. It was a bit scary swimming to the cliff in the dark and not being able to see potential rocks. A surge or two took me in and I only saw the bit I touched it about a metre out. Luckily it was relatively smooth and just barnacles and seaweed. I pushed off and then headed back to the IRB. I had made it. Bliss. I got to share the day with Fraser, who I'd met on the Sunday before at Phil's swim squad. The first thing I asked after they dragged me into the IRB was, has Fraser made it? And I was so pleased that both of us had. Lesson number 8. This is a team effort and couldn't be done without everyone's support. In particular, Phil, with his knowledge, caring, and organising everything to keep us safe and give us the best possible chance of making it. My husband Lee, who I mentioned earlier, and everyone else who's encouraged me and made training fun. Thank you to you all.